Okay, in lesson 10C, we learned how to find the sum using summation notation. The way that works is you have a formula right here. The number down here tells you where to start at, and then the number up here tells you where to finish plugging them in, and then you would add up all of those terms. That's if you were doing it by hand. I taught you how to do that on the calculator. Now, if you don't have a formula though, because that's what this requires, you have to have a formula in order to use the summation notation. If you don't have it and the sequence is arithmetic, then you can actually just use this formula instead. Now, this formula has some parts to it that are kind of important. So you should all by this point recognize that this right here means the first term. A1 is always the first term. The thing that's kind of different about this formula is they actually ask you for the last term of the sequence. So this is the last number. So if they asked us to find the sum of 25 numbers, we would have to find the 25th number. And unfortunately, they don't give us that last number a lot of times, so we'll have to use a different formula to find it first. Now, one thing that I would also like to point out is anytime we're finding the sum, the formulas for sum will always have an S in the front, okay? The N represents the term or how many terms you're trying to add up. So if I wanted to find the sum of the first 10 terms, N would equal 10, and that means that this N would also equal 10. So we're going to use the formula a couple times. So this one says find the sum. Now these ones, they're pretty nice because they basically have all the numbers there. So we just have to figure out how many terms we have. So this is A1. This is, actually I don't like how I wrote that. Let me write that again. A1. This is A2, A3, A4, A5, A6, A7, A8, A9, and A10. So that means that we have to find the sum of 10 numbers. So if that's a 10, that means that in the formula, this is also a 10. So it's 10 divided by 2. And then we just add the first and last numbers together. So if you type all that stuff into your calculator, the final answer is just 100. So again, 100 is not a term from the list. It's what you get when you add up terms from that list. And it's specifically when you add up the first 10 for that pattern. Okay, next one. So this is A1. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is A7. So that means we want to find the sum of the 7 terms. It's going to be 7 divided by 2. And then we know the first term and the last term. So it's 40 plus 22. If you type all that in your calculator, you should get 217. The last one doesn't really give us a list, but it says integers from 1 to 100. So we're going to have to find the sum of the first 100 terms from 1 to 100. So that means that we do 100 divided by 2, and then it's going to be the first term and the last term. The first term in the list would be 1, the last term would be 100. So if we type all that stuff into our calculator, we eventually get 5,050. So one thing I want to point out, this number here is always going to match this number here because in the formula, they're both n's, so they're the same value. Okay, next part. This one, you can see that I kind of divided each question into 2 parts. So they want us to find the 150th number. In order to find the 150th number, the 150th sum, that means that they want us to add the first 150 sums, but the issue is they didn't go all the way to 150. They only went 5 terms. So the first thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to figure out what the 150th term is. So that's going to require this formula that we learned in the previous lesson. So it's going to be A sub n is equal to the first term plus the common difference, and then n minus 1. So I want to find the 150th term first. So it's going to look like this. 150 is equal to the first term. Now, the common difference is found by subtracting from right to left. So if I subtract from right to left, this thing right here is going to give me, I believe, 9. And then I would have, what is that, 150 minus 1. Now, when you guys do this, you don't really, you don't have to have, what do you call it, a Casio calculator at home. You can just go into Desmos and type it in. So I'm going to do that real quick just to show you. So you would just put in 5 plus 9, 9 parentheses, 150 minus 1. I'm going to close the parentheses here. So that's 1346. So 1346 Now that number right there is going to be important because now we have to find the sum of the first 150 terms. So it's going to be 150 divided by 2. And we have to use the first term, which we already know because they always give that to us. And we have to add that to the last term, which is 1346. So we go into decimals real quick. And we do, let me go ahead and delete this. We're going to have 150 divided by 2. And then we're going to have 5 plus 1346. So if for some reason you run out of time in class today, you could just use decimals at home or on your phone. I forgot what the number was. 101,325. So 101,325 is your final answer. Okay, so I'll show you that a couple more times. It says find the 75th partial sum. So we have to know the 75th number first. So we have to do this formula here. So it's going to be 75 over 2. And then we're going to have to do, oh, actually, I'm using the wrong formula. Hang on a second. Don't want to do that. We have to find the 75th formula, or 75th number first. So that's going to be the first number added to the common difference. This one looks like it's going up by 4 every time. So it's 4 parentheses 75 minus 1. So if you type all that stuff in the calculator, you should get 290. And then we use that answer in the second part. So when we find the sum of the first 75 numbers, that's going to be 75 over 2. And then we're going to have the first number, which is -6. And then we're going to have to add 290 to that. So our final answer is 10,650. Okay, the next one. The next one says an auditorium has 20 rows of seats. There are 20 rows of seats in the first, or there's 20 seats in the first row, 21 seats in the second row, 22 seats in the third row, and so on. So how many seats are there in all 20 rows? So the pattern is going to start off like this. So it's going to start off at 20, then it's going to go to 21, and then it's going to go to 22, and so on. That's going to continue all the way up to the 20th row. So I have to find how many seats are in the 20th row. So a 20 is going to be 20 plus the common difference. It looks like the common difference is just going up by 1. There's 20 rows, so it'd be 20 minus 1. So if I type all that into the calculator, that should give me 39 seats in that last row. So now I can find the sum. So the sum is going to be the sum, not the sum of n, it's going to be the sum of the 20 rows. That's going to be 20 divided by 2, and that has to get multiplied by the first term, which is 20, plus the last term, which is 39. So this auditorium would have a total of 590 seats. So the big thing in this formula, or in this lesson, is you got to know what the formulas do. So I showed you 2 different formulas. One came from a previous lesson. This one tells you a number down the list somewhere. So we only have to use it if they don't show it to us. So if they're asking us for the 200th number and they only show us the first 5, we have to use this first. The thing about that is the answer to this basically goes right here. And this one right here, this one actually, this formula just finds the sum. So that basically means that they're adding up the numbers from that list. But again, a lot of times they don't give you this term right here, so you have to find it by using this formula so you can plug it into this problem. And that is lesson 10D. So I think that's pretty straightforward. It's going to be a lot of calculator work, and you got to make sure you know which formulas you're using. Oh, Bad Bunny says hi.